Welcome back. You're with Newsday. Australia will strengthen its capabilities under a new defence agreement worth $1.7 billion. The government will buy 200 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the US, which can attack land targets from 1,500 kilometres away, alongside 60 anti-radiation guided missiles. Joining us live with more analysis is Professor Peter Dean, Director of Foreign Policy and Defence at the United States Studies Centre. Peter, just explain for us the jump up in terms of capability that these missiles will bring to Australia in terms of our strike capability.
Well, Tomahawk is a really important part of the military arsenal that the United States has deployed. And in fact, it's the United States and the United Kingdom are the only two countries so far. So we'll be the third country to develop this capability. And as it notes, it's a very long-range strike capability, out to 1,500 kilometres. These are being purchased to be equipped into our air warfare destroyers, who are fitted with a US Aegis combat system, and the vertical launch cells, which can take, as we're seeing in the vision here, the long-range Tomahawk missiles to be able to do those strike packages. This package also includes radiation missiles, as you said, for our Growler electronic warfare aircraft and our F-35 aircraft. They are critical to suppress any adversary's radar facilities that can be able to detect things in the air or at sea on the ground. And of course, there's the Spike missiles that will equip Army for our anti-tank services. So this is fundamentally a core part of what the DSR, the Defence Strategic Review, is driving at in terms of acquiring greater long-range strike. And that was one of the priorities that the government identified out of the DSR. And as you see, they're moving quite quickly here in acquiring these high-level capabilities.
So to be very clear here, though, Peter, I mean, China already has this capability, doesn't it, to strike Australian land if it wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, China is a very sophisticated military capability system that it has within its defence forces. It has very long-range strike capabilities through its missiles. That's missiles equipped on its air force, its long-range bombers. It's from its ships as well at sea, but also it has ballistic missiles, the very long-range DF-21s and DF-26s, which can reach out and strike to the northern parts of Australia. And a lot of the Chinese capabilities, if they are launched off platforms such as the artificial islands that they've created in the South China Sea, could range into the northern part of Australia. So this is a fundamentally core part of Australia's strategy that it's announced within the Defence Department of being able to hold any adversary at risk in Australia's northern approaches. And equipping our ships with these long-range Tomahawk missiles is the first step in fundamentally building a more anti-access area denial capability for the Australian ADF to be able to provide for more sovereign capability and to strengthen our defences in a time of what we know is really heightened tensions in the Indo-Pacific, increased great power competition. And we've seen fundamental moves on this from the Japanese as well in their investment in counter-strike capabilities. So this is a direction that the United States and its allies are moving in the region to bolster deterrence and to help maintain that strategic balance of power.
So what's the timeline for when we'll actually get these, and will we play a role here in Australia in producing them, in manufacturing?
Well, eventually we may well get to the manufacturing stage under the Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance project that the Defence Department and government has underway. But these are going to be military off-the-shelf sales. They've been pre-approved by Congress. We knew that from earlier this year. So this is the actual, from the pre-approval phase, this is actually to the signing the contracts and agreeing on the cost price of these capabilities and looking to develop them as quickly as possible. The Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance system that the government set up is more of a longer-term process where we may well establish missile production capabilities in Australia. So it's yet to be determined whether that's going to be components or that it's going to be whole missiles, whether it's going to be based around particular types of weapon systems. But we're seeing the first stages of this only a few weeks ago with the government's announcement of moving into the manufacture of different capabilities such as 155mm artillery shells. So it's a development pathway that we're on. Certainly the Minister, Pat Conroy, has talked about the need for sovereign capabilities in terms of missile defence, and I think a part of the broader strategy, including the emphasis on accelerated preparedness and building out the defence industrial base in the country. I think it's going to be really keen over the medium term that Australia forms a partnership with some key companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, who are part of the Guido enterprise, to deliver on some of these highly sophisticated weapons like the Tomahawk and manufacture them here in Australia as well. Because Yeah, there's not the capacity in the United States to meet the global demand, nor is there in Europe. So we're in a situation here where we start to need to develop sovereign capability.
Peter, we saw last week at the National Labor Conference that AUKUS was something of a flashpoint. We saw that in the end a pro-AUKUS statement was carried on Voices, but there certainly was some dissent among the ranks. As it stands there, though, as a sort of end result here, I mean, the US would feel pretty confident that the major parties here in Australia are both on board now and into the future for this agreement.
Look, definitely. So what we knew going into the conference was two key things: that the parliamentary party had already committed to this under the Albanese government, that under the rules that the National Conference of the Labor Party can actually not pass resolutions that are binding on the parliamentary party, but that there was also some dissent within the party, particularly on the far left of the party, over concerns about nuclear non-proliferation, concerns about the cost of this capability, concerns about what's happening in the international environment, and of course concerns about jobs. And so there was a lot made of this sort of small opposition group, very vocal and very loud opposition group that was appearing. So we had reports of around about 40 local branches in the Labor Party opposing resolutions, either questioning or opposing AUKUS. But to put that in context, in Western Australia there, Ash, where you are, there's about 101 Labor Party local branches. So 40 branches passing resolutions is less than 1/2 of the numbers just in Western Australia, let alone all the other states of Australia combined. And when we got to the floor of conference, we saw a lot of wrangling and a bit of wheeling and dealing. But some of these key unions, like the Electrical Trades Union and others, were quite willing to come to negotiated agreements between Pat Conroy and Richard Marles on jobs, clean energy transition and other things in support for AUKUS. So the question does have to be how much of these legitimate concerns were really followed through by the depth of some of these parts of the union movement, how much of it was a bargaining position. The ultimate outcome here is a support at national conference for this. This really locks AUKUS and nuclear-powered submarines into a key part of the party platform for its defence area. And that's not this is not something we should underestimate, I should say, given the level of depth of opposition to nuclear issues that's been pervasive in the Labor Party for a very long time for good reason. But this is a real triumph, I think, of political pragmatism, defence pragmatism. And as the Prime Minister said, this is about assessing the region we live in as we see it, not as we want it to be. And I think this is why I saw this pragmatic, realistic approach won and carried the day quite well and quite easily in the end at conference.